Hey everybody, this is Gary Kemp here with Truth in Christ Apologetics. Been a little bit since I made a video. Wanted to reach out and let everybody know I'm still alive. I'm rocking the new glasses so I can see better. So that's a good thing. I've been thinking about this incident since it happened a few weeks ago where I had an exchange with Professor Dave Explains. I'm not sure if anybody is aware of who Dr. James Tour is. He is a fellow Christian. He's also a working scientist in the field of nanotechnology and a biochemist. He goes around and does lectures on origin of life studies and points out the truth on origin of life studies, how difficult it actually is, how far scientists are from reproducing abiogenesis in a lab. If anybody knows, it's basically chemistry. You have certain chemicals that combine under certain conditions, reaction, heat, etc. There are points in the process where you have to apply heat, stop the reaction, apply colder temperatures, add a new agent, things of that nature. For people to suggest that this randomly happened in a pond is just nuts. And we will get into some of this during this video. But Dr. James Tour is very well educated on the subject, and he has lectured at universities on the subject, taught classes on the subject, but mostly he is a working scientist. He just doesn't sit around writing papers. So the man knows what he's talking about, and you can verify what he says. You can go look up things that he brings up in magazines and published articles. He doesn't bias his opinions and his facts through his Christianity. But Professor Dave on his channel does a rebuttal of one of Dr. Tour's videos and basically suggests that because he is a Christian, that his views are skewed and biased. And then Professor Dave actually makes statements that are very misleading to people, trying to say that we're further along in origin of life studies than we are. So Professor Dave and I had an exchange in the YouTube comment section, which you can clearly see his rudeness, his pride, his hubris, and his atheist bias shining through. I believe this is important for me to make this video because he does make very good educational videos on other subjects. He does a wonderful job at that. I will give the man the credit on that. But on certain subjects like macroevolution, origin of life, his atheistic views and his bias clearly shows through. So I believe people need to be aware of this so we can keep our kids away from this channel or at least control the content that they watch on these channels. So again, let's go ahead and get into Professor Dave's statements on his rebuttal video. And then I will explain what I can as we go through those. And then we'll get into the comment section of our buddy, Professor Dave.
Hey everyone, so in between my more popular debunking topics, I've also put some attention towards young Earth creationism. At some point, I may do a lengthy video dismantling all the classic anti-evolution talking points, but today I wanted to do something else. Creationists also love to talk about how impossible abiogenesis seems, which is a word that refers to the initial emergence of living organisms from small molecules a little over 4 billion years ago, whether they simply have no understanding of biochemistry or are pushing a religious agenda, or both. They are quite vocal in proclaiming the notion to be absurd. Some of them like to pretend that academia is on their side, and their patron saint in this endeavor is James Tour, a synthetic organic chemist that speaks out against abiogenesis. Several hundred times I've been linked to a particular video of his, always by somebody presuming that his expertise in chemistry makes him the final authority on this matter. Let's get a taste of that video now.
We don't even know how to make the molecules. We are lost on how to do this. We can't even make the basic building blocks. But even if we could, from prebiotic type environment to make these, with all the intellect that we put into this, even if we could make them, we have no idea how to assemble them.
So that's James Tour, and as we will see, he is very emphatic about his rejection of abiogenesis as a feasible process. But he is even more emphatic about something else, and we should make this known immediately so as to properly contextualize this discussion.
Not only am I Christian, but I love Jesus tremendously. He is the best. He is everything to me. I am much more than just a Christian in name.
Jesus Christ rose from the dead. He is the Son of God, and it's on that I based my faith. And I opened my eyes. I was on my knees. I opened my eyes. Who's in my room? That man, Jesus Christ, stood in my room.
So that should give you a better picture of the headspace he is coming from. Now, before we get started, I want to make it clear that this video is not specifically intended to be a character assassination of Dr. Tour. This is for two reasons. First, he is not a con man like most of the people I debunk. He's not deliberately peddling misinformation to make money on the internet. He is a respected chemist. And second, although the reasoning behind his stance on abiogenesis is clearly religiously motivated, despite his best efforts to convince people otherwise, he is entitled to his religious beliefs. I am not making this video to mock everyone who believes that some sentient entity was involved in the origin of life on Earth, partially because it's not something I can readily disprove the way one can trivially disprove a young Earth. This video is aimed at science-illiterate people who blindly link to Dr. Tour in an empty argument from authority to confirm their own bias and push an anti-science agenda.
Okay, I apologize for playing so much of that, but I wanted it to be clear right from the beginning of Professor Dave's rebuttal video of how he feels about Christianity. He's obviously feels that even though Dr. Tour is a well-respected chemist in his field, that because he's a Christian, that he is not able to deliver scientific information without bias. So let's get into some more of his rebuttal video and look at his talking points as to why.
It is clear that his religious views cloud his capacity to interpret research on this topic, as does his gross overestimation of his own abilities. While it is true that as an organic chemist, he has a dramatically enhanced capacity to understand this topic over a layperson, it is still not his area of research. Pretending a synthetic organic chemist is best equipped to understand the origin of life just because they build small molecules is like pretending that a particle physicist is best equipped to understand organic chemistry, something which Dr. Tour would vehemently disagree with. Origin of life research is a complex, multidisciplinary field. It is not his expertise, nor in his authority to flippantly dismiss, as he attempts to do, oftentimes with reasoning that ignores basic facts in biology. Second, I want to go through some of the very common but embarrassingly invalid talking points that uneducated creationists use when discussing abiogenesis. Dr. Tour is much too smart to use these, but because I hear them all the time and we are on the subject anyway, there are a couple greatest hits that deserve to be dissected.
Okay, I just want to take a moment and make sure everybody understands what Professor Dave is saying here. He is saying, because Dr. James Tour is an organic chemist, he is not qualified to talk about origin of life studies. First of all, Professor Dave is not have a degree in anything to do with bioorganic chemistry. Dr. James Tour is a bioorganic chemist. That's what organic chemistry is. The man has made graphene or graphene nanocars that drill through cancer cells and kill them. He has developed nanotechnology that has helped restore people's hearing, and they're currently working on restoring people's sight. This is what the man does for a living. So yes, the man is qualified to talk on origin of life studies.
When one looks at a typical textbook, one will see some prehistoric pond and molecules, and those molecules coming together and forming a cell, and those cells coming together and some slithering creature coming out of this pond. That is fallacious. There is no truth in that.
This is one version of a talking point Jim brings up a lot. He hates how in some textbooks you see a primordial soup of molecules, some lightning, and then all of a sudden a cell is there, and then maybe a lizard crawling onto land, or something like that. To call this a complete view of abiogenesis and evolution would be absurd, but absolutely no one proposes this. This is something that a lot of creationists do. They refer to what is very obviously a textbook meant for middle school students and pretend it represents the pinnacle of scientific thought on the matter. Sixth graders have zero capacity to understand biochemistry, so their textbook doesn't have any biochemistry in it. A college-level textbook will not look like this, so this is a dishonest talking point.
Okay, so we have Professor Dave saying nobody thinks this, but then admits it's in books for students, mid-grade or middle school students. It was in my book for biology in high school. So to say that nobody thinks this is completely dishonest, but yeah, it's in textbooks. Well, if it's not correct, why is it in textbooks? This is what middle school and high school teaches. It's not until you get into college that they expand upon origin of life. But they still use this analogy in the introduction. So when a scientist says this is fallacious, this isn't true, and then the guy that's debunking the video says, well, yes, it's not true. That's not true, but it's in the textbook. I mean, come on, give me a break.
We do not know how to build even a simple bacterium. The simplest bacterium with its 256 protein coding genes, we have no idea how to build it. First of all, we don't know how to build the molecules, the 4 classes of molecules that are needed for it. We don't know how to, even if we had those 4 classes of molecules, assemble them even into the simplest of bacteriums. We don't know how to do that.
So there are 2 enormous problems with this. Jim is constantly talking about how we don't know how to make the 4 classes of biomolecules, which are nucleic acids, proteins, carbohydrates, and lipids. This is ridiculous. Nucleic acid synthesis and protein synthesis are utterly trivial. It's so easy to do that we even figured out how to make machines that do it for us. We type in the sequence we want on a computer, let the machine run, and we can get a DNA strand of any sequence of nucleotides we want, or a protein of any sequence of amino acids we want. Carbohydrates are a bit more complex since, despite consisting of the same monomer over and over, they can connect in a number of different ways. So synthesizing polysaccharides is trickier, though we are making progress with that too. And lipids like triglycerides can be synthesized easily. Any biomolecule is easy to synthesize. Jim knows this. He's a synthetic chemist. What he probably means is that we haven't seen these biomacromolecules form spontaneously outside of a biological system. But that's not what he says. He does not make the distinction, and this seems deliberate on his part. Next, he talks about us being unable to assemble a simple bacterium. This is absolutely irrelevant. The instructions for assembly are encoded in the DNA, and DNA predates all bacteria. The issue is to arrive at the bacterial genome, not to somehow be able to assemble a complete bacterium from its fully formed constituent parts, because nature doesn't do that either. Nature assembled some dramatically simpler precursor, which was self-replicating and also self-improving due to natural selection. Every bacterial cell alive today is tremendously more complex than the first protocell that must have formed, so this is not a valid argument. It's also incredibly anti-intellectual. We can't make planets and stars either. Does that mean nature can't have made them spontaneously?
Okay, right here, again, this is just complete dishonesty on Professor Dave's part. That clip, and I'll put the clip to, or the link to the original video and another one of Dr. Jor's videos in the link description box below, where he goes into more detail on origin of life. But this clip is taken completely out of context. What Dr. James Tour says in this video is that, yes, we can make these molecules in a lab with complete human interaction upon them. What he's saying we don't know how to do is just, they don't know how to have them migrate to origin of life. They do not, these molecules will just not make themselves and the specific orders needed for proteins and things and lipids to combine. Even in a protocell, they've only used 1 or 2 types of lipids that combine automatically in water. But in a cell, there's over 40,000 different lipids that are used. And you can see this again in one of Dr. Tor's videos. As far as Dr. Tor saying we do not know how to make a bacteria, they do not. All they know how to do is copy. They can take a cell membrane from an existing cell, and they can take RNA or DNA out of a bacteria and inject it into another cell. But all scientists can do is copy. When it comes to knowing how to actually put a strand of DNA together to make it function, they do not know how to do this. So they cannot build a cell, is what he is saying. Yeah, we can copy genetic code all day long, but we can't design a bacteria of our own. We cannot design a DNA strand of our own. If we know the strand, the sequence of the genetic information, sure, we have a machine that can make it for us. But again, we're copying.
For example, carbohydrates, which is the main class of compounds. These are the units that hook together DNA. These are the units that have identifying aspects on cell structure. These are the units that the cell is going to need for the energy of life. Carbohydrates are kinetic products, meaning that if they should form, they would decompose. They decompose over time. In relatively short amounts of time, they decompose. The very reactions that make them, unless somebody is there to pull them out, to fish them out, to stop the process and to put them in a bottle under inert conditions in a freezer. And not just one, there's many, many different types you have to do this. They end up going through a process of what's referred to as caramelization, meaning that they polymerize. They polymerize. The very aldol reactions that were used to make them just continue. And you get polyaldols, you get polycondensation reactions, and they caramelize. Or they undergo, with formaldehyde, which is a presumed prebiotic chemical, they undergo rapid Cannizzaro reactions. So the aldehyde is oxidized to formic acid, and this nice carbohydrate that you made has just been reduced. So the aldehyde from the carbohydrate has gone back to an alcohol. So there's competing reactions. So time does not solve the issue.
So this is an abbreviated example of one of Jim's favorite talking points, which is that long spans of time make abiogenesis less likely rather than more likely because biomolecules have a tendency to degrade. But there are some problems here. First, he is presuming that nature might synthesize one component of life one time and that's it. There's no reason to believe this. If conditions are allowing for some molecule to form or polymerize, then it can be doing that all the time. It polymerizes, then degrades, then polymerizes again. Whatever biochemical process the molecule will later be involved in, the fact that it degrades is irrelevant if it is constantly being formed as well, and even more irrelevant once self-replication came about, such that a mechanism is in place to continually build copies given the raw components. He also refers to a specific reaction called the Cannizzaro reaction, which requires strongly basic conditions. He knows these conditions are required, and he knows the ocean did not provide such strongly basic conditions, so I don't know why he brings this one up at all. Beyond this, it is pointless to cite every extraneous reaction that was potentially happening at that time, as useless products were simply not selected by nature. Nature utilized the structures that were useful for information storage and metabolic activity, and ignored the rest. Dr. Tour very clearly demonstrates his inability to lecture on this topic when he talks like this. He is comparing the chemistry he is familiar with in his lab to what happened in the ocean billions of years ago, ignoring the stark differences in setting and principles involved. He is projecting his expertise in synthetic chemistry where it does not belong, as abiogenesis did not directly reflect modern lab synthesis.
Okay, again, this is just Professor Dave being completely wrong or completely unable to talk on this subject. Anybody who knows anything about chemistry, when you have chemicals in the mix that are junk or not needed for the reaction, they interfere with the reaction. They end up making garbage with the stuff that you're trying to make or the output that you're trying to get. You need to be able to purify. You need to be able to refine. The argument of things will just keep on producing. I mean, at one point you have source materials, you're going to run out of those. Again, Dr. Tour, I will put the links below so you can look at his videos and get a better understanding of what he's saying here. But Professor Dave is just wrong on this. I'm not going to go into the rest of the video. I will actually post a link below to the entire video that Professor Dave does. But I want to go ahead and get into some of the comments now on this video in the YouTube section, so you can get a better idea of the type of guy Professor Dave is. So after watching Professor Dave's video, I posted a comment in the comment section on YouTube. Got it right here in front of us here. I did have respect for Professor Dave till this. Dave, this guy's credentials are far more than yours. Yes, scientists can copy existing stuff all day long. To say RNA could form with enough information to become self-replicating is a joke. I did my own research on what this man says a long time ago. You got this one wrong, buddy. Go back to picking on the flurfers, the flat earthers. You act like someone can't be a Christian and still be objective. Why don't you go look up the axis of evil, the CMB data from the WMAP team and the European Space Agency's Planck satellite? See if you can explain that without bias. Now, for those that don't know, the axis of evil is a term that was dubbed to the lines that line up with the ecliptic plane of our solar system and the Earth when they mapped out the cosmic microwave background radiation from the Big Bang explosion. And it does seem to suggest that we are in a favored position in the center of the universe, the known universe, which would place us very near where the Big Bang actually happened. So, again, I'm being objective here. I'm saying it seems to suggest that we are, but more research is done. I would like to see his take on that. His reply, you didn't watch this. You didn't do any research. You have a predetermined set of beliefs that were handed to you through indoctrination. And anyone who you think violates them is right, and anyone who contradicts them is wrong. The only joke is that you think you have a shred of a clue about biochemistry. Ribozymes are self-replicating RNA molecules. They exist. Sorry. I have no idea why you are attempting to bring up cosmology that you don't understand. Your religion has poisoned your capacity to think rationally, just like Jim's. Deal with it. Now, what he's saying here is because I'm a Christian, I'm an idiot. He doesn't know anything about me. Yes, ribosomes are self-replicating RNA molecules, but they are not a strand of RNA, DNA, RNA information that self-replicates. This is just, again, something he says to be misleading. So I respond, well, that just shows me and everyone else what kind of an arrogant phallus you are. Since I'm a Christian, that was my nice way of calling him something. Anyway, first of all, you do not know me. You have no idea of my level of knowledge and education or any clue what I have researched. You should be aware there is more misinformation on the internet than correct information. So yeah, when I see anything, I research what is said. Not like most that blindly accept anything they hear or see. I did look into the information he provided quite a while back. Frankly, I'm surprised you waited as long as you have to say anything. Again, just because someone has a belief doesn't mean they can't be a scientist without bias. And like I said, I'll take his education over what I found on yours when talking about the subject. I will say most of your videos are nicely done, but honestly, any idiot with a camera can take information from someone else and make a video with that information that seems smarter than they are. When scientists can show they have RNA combined in a lab, even with the most controlled conditions, where the RNA randomly forms in a meaningful way, that means structured information that allows it to reproduce itself and perform the most basic cell functions to keep existing, I'll admit I'm wrong. Hasn't happened. Don't see it happening anytime soon. Copying something with a machine is not abiogenesis. Mathematically, we have not been around long enough if you look at the odds of just the building blocks to combine correctly. If you can't understand that, it's not my problem. For as far as anyone else, if you watch his videos when he's putting down a flat earther or somebody he thinks is stupid, that is what he says. As far as the CMB mapping, I do know what I'm talking about. And again, as I stated, I would be interested in hearing your take on it, as both sets of data tend to suggest the Copernican principle is wrong. Not saying it is, not claiming God's hiding out there ready to jump out from hiding and scare you, but would genuinely like your explanation as to why the data seems to show our solar system does appear to be in a favored middle position within the entire universe. I wouldn't want you to get involved with something you're not up to speed on, though, or uncomfortable with, though. It is interesting. His reply, yes, I do know you. Your effing YouTube handle is Truth in Christ Apologetics. I know everything about you. I know what you are. I know that you are science illiterate, and I know that you are brainwashed by your religion. That's why you come to videos like this and spew nonsense that you think is science and that you think supports your baseless worldview. It's pathetic. Yes, you absolutely do blindly accept what people like Jim say because it's precisely what you want to hear. You don't even possess the basic vocabulary to have this conversation. When you say have RNA combined in a lab, that doesn't mean anything. Now, he knows exactly what I'm talking about. When you say RNA randomly forms in a meaningful way, that doesn't mean anything. Yes, it does. It means a meaningful, structured set of information. When you say the odds of just the building blocks to combine correctly, that doesn't mean anything. You don't know what the nucleic acids are or what they do. You don't know anything about biochemistry whatsoever. When you say Copernican principle, that doesn't mean anything. Our solar system is not in a middle position with respect to anything, and it doesn't seem to be. There is no context which that statement makes any sense. You are just unimaginably clueless and protecting your ignorance onto the human and projecting your ignorance onto the human race. Take a seat and let the adults do the talking, okay, kiddo? To which I responded, gee, compared to your videos, that was the most useless babble I have ever heard. So let me see if I have this correct. Because I believe in God, you are automatically assuming I'm stupid, which he has said. I'm science illiterate. I'm dumb because of my faith. That right there proves how ignorant you are. And the passion you seem to put into the writing would suggest for you there is no God and you hate him. Sir Isaac Newton was certainly a Christian. Galileo was a Catholic. Most of the founding fathers were at least deists. Even Einstein was agnostic. Yet these men were able to function on an intellectual level and do so rationally. There are people at Harvard, Yale, Princeton, MIT, etc., that are just as smart as Dawkins, Krauss, and believe in God, and are able to do so and still interact within the scientific community without it interfering. Why don't you go look at the data and stop acting like you know everything? If it is above your head and you don't understand it, just man up and say so. Even Lawrence Krauss said the data from the WMAP and Planck satellites tend to suggest we are in a favored position. Again, if it's something that you don't understand, you just keep plugging your atheist beliefs into things. I guess since you can't actually deliver actual science without your beliefs interfering, you assume no one else can. Now, again, this is something I brought up that I wanted to see if he could do a video on without a biased agenda, without a biased take. And all he's done so far, because I disagree with him, is to basically call me stupid. I'm stupid because I believe in God. I'm stupid because I'm a Christian. And actually try to put me down because he thinks he's intellectually more superior than anyone else. So his response, no, it's not useless babble. It's just words you don't understand because you're completely science illiterate. So no, I didn't say you're stupid because you believe in God, which he basically called me science illiterate, stupid because I do. In fact, I didn't even call you stupid, but since you can't seem to read or listen, I think you probably are quite stupid. Again, if you go back to the 16th century, most people were religious. There wasn't really any option without science. Now I'll give you one more chance. Do you actually want to talk about biochemistry, or do you want to just whine about your God with what a meanie pants I am? Go ahead and bring up a singular talking point, and I'll explain to you precisely why you have no effing clue what you're talking about. Go ahead. If you really want to talk about cosmology or cosmology instead, then you better get your facts straight and stop misquoting people, because no credible scientist thinks we are at the center of the universe. You are the perfect example of how religion poisons the mind. It's tragic. And I responded back, Professor Dave, you said because I believe in God, I am science illiterate. Like I said, you have no idea about me, my knowledge, or my education. And here's proof, Lawrence Krauss's own words. I didn't misquote anyone. I took this quote right off of Lawrence Krauss's website when talking about this subject. But when you look at the CMB map, you also see that the structure that is observed is, in fact, in a weird way, correlated with the plane of the Earth's around the sun. Is this Copernicus coming back to haunt us? That's crazy. We're looking at the whole universe. There's no way there should be a correlation of structure with our motion of the Earth around the sun, the plane of the Earth around the sun, the ecliptic. That would say we are truly the center of the universe. The new results are either telling us that all of science is wrong and we're the center of the universe, or maybe the data is simply incorrect. Or maybe it's telling us there's something weird about the microwave background results, and that maybe there's something wrong with our theories on a larger scale. And I responded, in fact, if you accept these findings that everything we know can be explained without dark matter or dark energy, it's obvious you either haven't heard of this or you're not familiar with it. Go do some research on the subject. Side note, if you're as smart as you portray, then you should No, judging someone's ability to comprehend a subject based upon their spiritual beliefs and their ability to excel in subject matter is as outdated as making assumptions on skin color. And P.S. I didn't bring up God or wine. Now, again, he goes through this, you didn't bring up a single talking point, blah, blah, blah. So I responded, dude, you're a joke, blah, blah, blah. He says, as expected, you're still not giving a talking point. So I said, fine. I put, well, let's start with your statement about DNA. Yes, we have a machine and we can make any DNA strands we want. While true, scientists just can't make DNA strand from scratch. While there's still a large number of genes that their functions are unknown, so scientists have to copy. In regards to protocells, you leave the viewer with the impression that these are easy to make. They have yet to assemble one protocell in a lab that works and is self-replicating. In response to Dr. Tor's comment, we don't even know how to make a simple bacteria. And your cheeky little response of, yeah, we do, here's one right here, that is completely misleading. You know full well, even if scientists copied that single cell and tried to assemble it from scratch, piece by piece, they couldn't. All you would have is a dead mix of chemicals that would start to decay immediately. So just stop with the BS, dude. And that's just off the top of my head while I'm going about my day. Your bias is clearly shining through. If you want me to nitpick it to death, I'll be happy to. Now, here's what has happened next. Your response will be blah, blah, blah. Your statement of blah. You believe in God, so you're illiterate when it comes to science, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, if you don't understand it, it's not my problem. But then you will go find some write-up somewhere that you read that you think supports what you said. Go find it. I'll be waiting. Might want to check the credentials of the author first. So I gave him talking points about why I thought he was wrong. That was 2 weeks ago. No response, no video, no nothing. Again, I decided to do this video just to let people know Professor Dave is very popular on YouTube. He has a lot of content, classroom content for learning scientific topics. He does a very good job of presenting information and teaching kids. And I hate to say it, but the guy is, he's an atheist, which I don't have a problem with. He's freely able to choose to reject God if he wants to. I don't have an issue with that. But when he starts projecting his atheistic bias and views into content, then we as Christians need to go find our content elsewhere and certainly not allow our kids to view it. It's Gary Kemp, Truth in Christ Apologetics. Thank you for your time and watching this video. Please hit the subscribe button, the notification bell, and like the video. Thank you.